Hello students, a pleasant greetings to you all. Welcome and welcome back again to another video tutorial lesson from the AP3X Institute of Applied Mathematics Education, where we learn the language of the universe. Of course, primarily my contents created here are based around the CSEC, CCSLC, SEA curriculum preparation for exams. These topics are mainly taught with the emphasis of preparing students for exams and also with giving students a comprehensive understanding when it comes to topics that they may find a little bit challenging. Of course, if this is the first time here on the channel, do not forget to hit the subscribe button below, turn on your post notification bell to be notified on a daily basis and also a weekly basis for a wide variety of contents. I have been recently posting my live classes on my channel. So during the weeks at about 8:30 in the morning, 10:30, 4:30 and 5:30, well, the videos are actually posted during the nights, but they are kept during the days. So it'd be nice for you guys to tune into some of those live classes. If you have missed any of your sessions at school that maybe the topic is related to you, it will be good for you there to get as much review as possible. All right, so be sure to hit the subscribe button below and leave some positive questions and comments down below. Let me know if the videos are of any value to you. All right, let's jump right into today's lesson. And this is a highly requested video, and it has been a very requested video for the better half of a year. A lot of my students every year for some reason find that challenge in actually comprehending ratio and proportion. Now, ratio and proportion is in fact connected with two previous contents that I have here on the channel, that is direct and indirect, otherwise called inverse proportion or variation. So a lot of the little concepts that we learned in that topic, I'll be sure to leave a link in the description, or I'll just leave a link to my playlist in the description. Maybe pop up here just about now. You should see a link popping up on the screen as it relates to getting to those particular tutorial videos. Really good tutorial videos there that gives you a lot of comprehensive review on proportion. Now we're going to be extending the concept of proportion then to ratio. I'm going to be sharing with you three very important steps that I take from ever since I've been teaching and from ever since I've been doing ratio. These three steps have sufficed with a little bit of intuitive thinking, a little bit of what I would say common sense. Then at times, then you find that you get more consistent results with your questions. So I'm going to be walking you through the process of ratio, working a few example questions with you, and let's see how it goes. So let's get right into it, guys. Let's go. So for today's lesson, it is in fact ratio and proportion. And so let's start off with a basic definition of ratio. A ratio is a comparison between two or more quantities, which is written in the form A to B. So particularly when you see a ratio question, or when you see a question from another topic that's related to ratio, usually you're going to find that this is your key, A to B. Example, 2 to 3, 5 to 7, 7 to 11, 5 to 9, there, and so on and so forth. Right? Now, what exactly is A and B? All right, so I've color coded it here. A and B are what we refer to as individual shares or individual portions. All right, I kind of like using the word shares. So A and B are the shares, the individual amounts, not in terms of money, but in terms of the amount from the total proportion that each individual in the ratio receives. Now, a ratio can be considered as a fraction. Of course, yes, it can be. A ratio can be considered to be a fraction where each share is in fact a fraction of the total proportion. So, in other words then, when I'm teaching my students this in my live classes, what I normally explain to them is that when it comes to the total proportion, this represents the amount of slices that this particular quantity has. All right, so it could be that you're sharing up you're sharing a whole cake between 3 people, or you're sharing a sum of money between 2 persons, or you're sharing the value of something between 2 or more persons. All right, so when we talk about total proportion, what we're talking about is how many parts, how many shares, how many portions, how many slices does this particular quantity contains or has. All right, and then basically A and B then tells us how much of that slice, how much of that portion, how much of that share does that individual or that individual or that individual receives. Okay, now, how do we actually find the total proportion? Then, in fact, the total proportion, as we said earlier, is the total parts that whatever is being shared has, and can be calculated simply by adding the individual shares. So, say for example, then that a sum of money is being shared in the ratio 5 to 4, then we know that the total shares in this portion here has 9 parts. That is, in fact, A plus B. Or let's say then that an estate valued at $100,000 is being shared between 3 friends in the ratio 2 to 3 to 4, or 2 to 3 to 9. Say for example 2 to 3 to 9, then that is in fact 14 parts. 2 plus 3 plus 9 is equal to 14 parts, and that's going to be very, very key, especially with the latter part of the question. You're going to find so many times over that they're asking you for how much money was shared, or how much portion does this person receive. You're always going to need the total proportion. Now, earlier in the introduction of the video, I did say to you that there are 3 steps that I usually take to solve any and every one of my ratio problems that I get. Now, of course, not all ratio questions are going to require all 3 steps. Some may only require 2, but you most likely will not go more than 3 steps. And these 3 steps are what I would say fundamental. They are so fundamental that even when other intuitive thinking might be required for the question, then of course these 3 steps will always be a requirement to get started. So what are these 3 steps? The 3 steps to solving any ratio problem is in fact 1, identifying what I refer to as the comparative quantities and also the respective ratio. Now, what do I mean by comparative quantities? I am referring to the fact that we need to identify who are the individuals that are a part of the proportion, the sharing, the amount that is being dispensed. Who are these persons? Are they 3 persons? Are they 3 sisters, 3 brothers, 3 friends? Is it between A, B, and C? Is it between boy, girl, and man? Is it between man, wife, and daughter? Who are the persons in the ratio? It is very important that we write this information down, not for the purpose of getting the answer correct, but it's giving you a starting point that can lead you to the next step. Now, for example, for step number 2 then, very importantly, we must calculate the total proportion. Whether it is that we're going to need it in the question or not, I think it's just fundamental for us to always be aware of how many portions does this whole has, how many parts, how many slices, how many shares does it have. Okay, and then for part 3 then, of course, we have to apply our direct and or indirect principle of finding one share. So important. Now, in a previous lesson we discussed, when we were talking about variation, we learned in fact that finding one share is the same thing as finding the value of k, where k is the constant of proportion. Now, you'll see here that we're not really using the variable k to represent one share, but in our previous, in our direct proportion and indirect proportion video, we looked so many times over at the importance of finding k. We cannot proceed without finding k. Same here. It's very challenging to determine anything that they're going to ask you without knowing the value of one share. All right, so that is pretty much the introduction and the steps required to solving ratio. Now let's go right ahead then and apply these steps to these particular questions that I have here written on screen for you. We're going to be progressively getting into the questions. We're going to be starting easy, then moving to easy to medium, then moving to medium, medium to hard, then I would say probably the hardest question that I could probably come up with at this level when it comes to ratio. So let's jump right into it. Here we go. Now a sum of $25,000 is to be shared between two students, and in fact these two students are two of my favorite students in my class, right? Two students that are very committed to their work, and they definitely are. I like to get my students involved on my channel. My channel is just is building a bond with my students, and so I use the names of two of my students in my class. A sum of $25,000 is to be shared between two students, Kamara and Jahim, in the ratio 3:7. Calculate the amount that both students should receive. All right, and there are many shortcuts to really doing this, but I particularly like a method that gives me consistency. I don't want to have to change my method for every question. I would love to have a method that works for every and any question, and so as I said before, we're going to be applying those 3 steps. So here we go. The first thing that I'm going to do here is that I'm going to be identifying my comparative quantities and the individual ratio, which in this case I am referring to Kamara compared to Jahim. And based on the question, the individual portions received by each student is in fact 3:7. Step 1 completed. All right, and I love to reward my students when they follow an exact step. Later on, when you become a bit more advanced, then I will accept you skipping steps. You know, you're advanced, so you can skip steps. But for now, if you are going to be, or if you're a student that finds ratio a challenge, then you're finding it a challenge because you're not taking the appropriate steps, the consistent steps to mastering this level of math. So here we go. So once it is then that we have identified our comparative quantities and the individual ratios, then our next step is to calculate the total proportion. So I normally write here TP, total proportion, is equal to 3 plus 7, which therefore equal to 10 parts or 10 shares. As I said, I like using the word shares. So 3 plus 7 gives me a total of 10 shares. Now, as I said earlier, there's a couple of ways to do this. Some students will approach this from a fractional perspective, and other students will apply it from the angle from which I've explained earlier. So I'm going to stick with my step. I'm going to be finding the value of 1 share. And once I find the value of 1 share, I'll be able to find the value of any amount of shares. So what we're looking at then is the fact that since $25,000 is what is being shared between these two students, then if I divide the $25,000 by the amount of parts that the proportion has, then that will tell me in fact that there is in fact $2,500 is the value of 1 share. 25,000 divided by 10 is $2,500 for 1 share. Now easily then we can calculate how much did Kamara receive. Kamara would have received 3 portions times 2,500, and Jahim would have received 7 portions times 2,500. And mathematically then you'll realize here then that Kamara would have received 7,500, and then Jahim would have received, say here, that's 3,500, that's 17,500. Yes, sound like about 17,500. Let's double check. 7 times 2, 14. 7 times 5, 35. So that's $17,500. And that is it. That is basically how you resolve that question. A question that is valued probably about 2 at maximum 3 points in an exam. Okay, and I've applied all my 3 steps. I have identified my comparative quantities in blue. I have found my total proportion here in black. I've calculated one portion, and then I've used the information that I've gathered and calculated to then answer the question that was asked. Okay, good job. So that is it. Let's move on to another progressively challenging question. Now, here we're looking then at the fact that a sum of money is to be shared among 3 friends. Again, these 3 students are students that are currently in my class: Whitney, Rihanna, and Brianna. In fact, they are actually 3 friends for real. In my actual classes, these students are real friends. Okay, so I love to get my students involved in my videos. A sum of money is to be shared among 3 friends: Whitney, Rihanna, and Brianna, in the ratio 2 to 5 to 9. So yes, a ratio, we had already discussed that it's a comparison between 2 or possibly more quantities. All right. Now, Rihanna received a total of $750. Let's take a pause. What is the difference between this question here and the one we did before? Well, it is in fact quite easy to identify. In the first question, you were told the amount of money that was being shared. Here, you're told that a sum of money, which means that we don't know how much money is being split up. So this then tells us that we cannot apply the same principle that we applied before. We have to apply the steps, but we can't think about the question the way how you would have thought about it before, because then easily to find one portion, we would have to know an information about one of these comparative quantities. So here we are being told that Rihanna is the one that got 750. So I would say then, all right, since the ratio is Whitney to Rihanna to Brianna, then of course Rihanna is in the middle. So Rihanna is the one that received the 5 shares. Therefore, we can put the $750 under Rihanna's name. All right, but before we do all of that, it's very, very important then that we apply our 3 steps. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is that I'm going to write down who are the persons involved in the ratio. I'm going to be using the initials of their name to save space. So Whitney compared to Rihanna compared to Brianna, and the ratio is 2 compared to 5 compared to 9. Step 1. I have not gone against my steps. Let's find the TP. So the total proportion here is in fact 2 plus 3, 2 plus 5 plus 9, and in fact 2 plus 5 is 7, 7 plus 9 is 16 shares. So yes, I know that 16 shares, whatever this sum of money is here that is being shared, I know that it has 16 parts. Now, due to the fact that Rihanna is the one that got the 750, I can put the $750 under Rihanna's name, which suggests that the 5 shares received by Rihanna is equivalent to the 750. So therefore then we can safely say then that 5 shares equals $750. So one portion or one share is going to be equal to $750 divided by 5. And so therefore then this looks to be 150 . Yes, that's $150. Okay, so value of one share is $150. Now I have completed all my 3 steps. I can then use all the information here that I have in red and blue to answer the question. First question says here that we should calculate the amount of money that was shared. Calculate the amount of money that was shared between the girls, all of them together, total. So that's where now this TP comes in handy, because now we know that one share is equal to 750. So 16 shares is equal to 16 multiplied by 750. All right, and that's how important that is. Now if you jump on our calculator here and we multiply 16 multiplied by 750, you're gonna find that the amount that was shared is in fact $12,000. That was the amount of money being shared between the three girls. Okay, oh pardon me, I think I made a mistake. I think it's 16 multiplied by 150. Pardon me guys, so sorry about that. So 16 multiplied by 150 gives us a total of $2,400. Do apologize for that. Got a little bit distracted there. Okay. All right. So fantastic then. So now that we know that the total amount of money being shared is $2,400, we are now being asked another question here. This is a follow-up question. Okay, what percentage of the amount did Brianna receive? What percentage of the amount? Okay, so we have to convert Brianna's amount that she received as a percentage of the total. So what percentage of the amount? It should have been the total. What percentage of the total? That's what I should have had here, guys. Again, do apologize for the typo. What percentage of the total did Brianna receive? Now, there's two ways to approach this. I particularly encourage my students to always find the simplest route. But then, of course, every student sees the problem differently. So I'm going to be doing it both ways. You can look at it from the ratio perspective. You can look at the fact that Brianna would have received a total of 9 out of the maximum of 16, and to convert her amount as a percentage we have to multiply it by 100. So therefore then, if we go on the calculator and we type in 9 divided by 16 multiplied by 100, you're going to find that Brianna has received 56 or approximately 56.25, or you can say approximately 56% of the money. So she has received a little bit more than half of what is being dispensed. All right, that's one way to look at it. Whilst some students may see it from the perspective where they have to calculate the amount of money that Brianna actually received. Now, since we already know that 9 shares is what Brianna received, and we know that the value of 1 share is in fact 150, then of course 9 times 150 will give us a total of $1,350. So basically then we are saying that Brianna would have received $1,350 out of the total of $2,400, and to convert her amount as a percentage we multiply it by 100. And if you do the math on this, all right, if you do the math on this, then you're going to find here that the answer works out to be exactly the same, 56.25%, or approximately 56%. Okay, so that's two ways to look at it. Pick your poison, as I've always told my students. Whichever method you find satisfactory to you, go right ahead and do so. All right, so now we're finally approaching the final question here, and this is probably the most challenging question that you will probably find here at this level in ratio. All right, now once you get these types of question, okay, where you don't know a lot of information about what's going on, you only know partial information, then a lot of intuitive thinking must take place. But apart from the fact that you have to add a little bit of thinking to the question, you most definitely have to apply those 3 steps that I showed you earlier, and we will not fail to apply the steps. So here we go. First thing here, let's read the question for understanding purposes. An estate valued at, it should have been at again, an estate valued at a certain amount of money was left behind to be split among 3 brothers, Jonathan, Malachi, and Alex, in the ratio 3:7:10. Now, it is said here that Alex received $8,500 more than Malachi. Our first task is to determine the amount of money that was given to be shared among the boys. All right, so how do we start this question? A lot of my students often explain that they're not so very sure where to start, or they try different methods. Once you begin to veer off your consistent plan of applying these 3 steps, you're going to get various different results and you're going to be very inconsistent. So to answer the question that you guys always ask me, where do I start? Start off by writing down who are the persons involved in the ratio and their individual shares. So we're looking at Jonathan, Malachi, and Alex. So let's write that down. Jonathan, Malachi, and Alex, and the ratio is 3 to 7 to 10. All right, so we have to start there. Okay, from there we know something about one of the brothers, right? Here it's very similar to the previous question where we were not told how much money was being shared, so that's going to be a challenge. What we do know is that we know something about one of the boys. What we know here is that Alex received $8,500 more than Malachi. So what does this mean? Does it mean that Alex got $8,500? Or did Alex get $8,500 along with the same amount that Malachi got? Here's the challenge. Malachi, we don't know nothing about Malachi. So I'm going to be doing the question 2 different ways. I'm going to be using an algebraic approach to this, and I'm going to be using a more traditional approach to this. Now, since we know that Alex got $8,500 more than Malachi, we can then bracket off the proportion with Jonathan. Let's now focus on then Malachi and Alex. Now, why do you think that Alex would have received $8,500 more than Malachi? It's very simple. Alex got more shares than Malachi. Now, the question is, how much more shares did Alex receive more than Malachi? Well, it's obvious. It is obvious that since Alex received, so we can simply see that the difference between shares is in fact 10 take away 7. That's 3 shares. So basically then, Alex would have gotten 3 more shares than Malachi. That information is key. If you're not able to determine this information here, then moving forward is going to be a challenge. Now, since it's a case where 3 shares then would have been equivalent, pardon me, let me just use a different color ink here for you guys. Since we safely say that 3 shares is equal to $8,500 because the 3 extra shares received by Alex was the exact reason why Alex got $8,500 more than Malachi. We can therefore say that 1 share is equal to $8,500 divided by 3. So if you go on our calculator and we divide 8,500 by 3, you're going to find here that the amount of 1 share is in fact $2,833.33. Okay. So that is the amount of 1 share. Now, once we have gotten that information, it's therefore very simple to move forward because we have completed all 3 steps. We have written down our comparative quantities and individual ratio, right? We have found the total proportion. No, we have not. So we skipped out step 2. Let's go ahead and do that. TP is equal to 3 plus 7 plus 10. So that's the only step that we skipped out. So that's 20 shares. And as you become advanced, you're going to find that you're going to be able to quickly know when you skipped out a step. Because sometimes the focus primarily is on finding that one portion. And sometimes we kind of skip out the fact that we need the total proportion. I don't recommend that you do, but if you're capable to find out your mistakes when you go through the question, then you can always catch yourself. But always be consistent, find your total proportion. So we have done everything. We have written down our comparative quantities and the individual ratio. We have now found our total proportion, and we have in fact used the information given to us to find one share. Now we can answer the question. It says determine the amount of money that was given to be shared among the boys. So therefore then we know that one share is 2,833, and even though we don't know how much money was being shared, we then certainly know that it has 20 parts. So therefore then we can easily say that the total amount of money shared among the boys was in fact 20 multiplied by 2,833.33. So if we multiply then this by 20, you're going to find that the answer, the total amount of money being shared between the boys is in fact $56,666.66. That is the amount of money that is being shared between the three boys. Now, part 2. Express Jonathan's share as a percentage of the total. So in the previous question, we did it 2 ways. Now, if you're at that level where you've picked your poison and you've made a decision as to which method you prefer, of course, you can go right ahead then and just look at what shares did Jonathan received. Now, we know from here that Jonathan got 3 shares. So we know that, therefore, then Jonathan would have gotten 3 out of the 20 shares. And of course, quickly get into our answer. 3 divided by 20 multiplied by $56,666.66. Okay. Jonathan would have gotten, let's write this down, $56,666. Oh, we want it at a percentage. Oh my lord. So 3 divided by 20 multiplied by 100. Pardon me guys, totally got distracted moments ago. We want the percentage, not the amount that Jonathan received. Okay. So therefore then, this would have been the fact that, let's do this again. That's 3 divided by 20 multiplied by 100. Jonathan would have received 15% of the money. And if you wanted to know how much did Jonathan actually received, you could have actually multiplied the $2,833.33 multiplied by 3, and that would have given you something close to 8,400 and change. Okay, that would have given you the amount, the actual amount that Jonathan received. But the question did ask us for the percentage. And here then, we're looking at the last question here. How much did Malachi receive? That's easy because Malachi has 7 shares. And then therefore, since Malachi has 7 shares, then it would be safe to say then that Malachi would have received 7 multiplied by the total of 1 share, which is 2,833.33. Multiplied by 7, and Malachi would have received 19,833.31. all right, so I hope that these 3 questions were of benefit to you. They did give you some clarity on a previous session that you had. Maybe there were some ambiguities in terms of your understanding. Hopefully these 3 questions have cleared up most of those ambiguities. Of course, going forward, you may see other types of ratio questions where they do follow-up questions. So it's really all about intuitive thinking. Okay, once you can intuitively think about what they're asking you and you understand the requirement, then most likely the 3 steps that I've showed you earlier would have provided you with more than enough information that you need to answer those follow-up questions. Alright, so I do hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Do not forget to hit the subscribe button below, turn on your post notification bell, hit the like button. It really does help the channel to grow. And of course, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Let me know what your thoughts is. Alright, so I'll see you in the next tutorial coming up on the channel. We're going to be talking about the distributive law. Okay, so do take care. Until then,